So this video is called Foods for Kids That Adults Love Too. So you will find that these recipes work very well for children, but not only for children. These are some things that I like to eat on a daily basis and things that will wow adults as well. A little bit about feeding children. I am a mom of a currently 3.5-year-old son. And so I've got my own experience, of course. I have friends that have young children as well that are attempting to raise them raw or mostly raw. So I have that experience to pull from, and as well as meeting people, talking to people, researching and writing about it as well. And I just feel like it's really something I'm passionate about, because it's just so important if you start your children young or since birth. It's that much easier, and you're just giving them so many tools in so many ways for their entire life. So not only is the nutrition critical, with all the environmental stressors, the things that everyone's being exposed to now right from birth, it's just so important to keep your immune system as strong as possible all the time, that the food and the diet is, of course, a really big part of that. And so from that standpoint, kids are getting diseases younger and younger, and we hear about it in the news all the time, or friends or whatever, people that diabetes, obesity is rampant in children. So I just feel like it's so important to start them now. And I don't think it's that hard, because a lot of these things they would naturally gravitate to and find really delicious, and with very little work on your part. So for those reasons, and also involving them in the food preparation and them seeing how to do these things from when they're young, they're going to have these wonderful tools to carry throughout their life. If they go off to school, they will know how to make all these things for themselves. And I find that they want to try things more when they're involved, and there's so many great things they can help you with in terms of raw food preparation in the kitchen. So it's really easy to get them in there with you and help. And I know my son can tell other people how to make chia porridge. He knows how to make kale chips, and he's only 3. He can explain it himself. So even if they go off it at some point in their lives, they'll know that they can come back to it. They'll know what to do when they need to do it. So with that said, another important thing I think for kids, and it's to boost their immune systems and to incorporate into their diets, is a lot of superfoods. And what those really mean are foods that are really easy to digest by the body. They're loaded above and beyond the average vegetable with different phytonutrients or aspects of nutrition that we need that are harder to find. And they're completely whole foods, naturally occurring. There's nothing adulterated about them. We're just getting them in different forms and using them in our food. It's just a great way to boost your intake, to ensure a full spectrum of nutrition, which some people get worried about with children, even though it's perfectly safe and healthy to raise your children raw. So adding these extra things in, even with adults, of course, it's really useful in enhancing your immune system. It's giving you that extra boost, because even if you're just eating a completely raw organic diet, you're still being bombarded by so many different non-food related stressors that anything extra you can give your immune system is really going to help. And these foods are foods too that are so concentrated you don't need as much of them, and if you eat a lot of superfoods, you probably find you aren't even as hungry. So they're just really sustaining all around. Some of the ones that I focus on are algae, like blue-green algae. I've got a few different forms here. This is a flaked blue-green algae called E3AFA, but the frozen one is very common. That one's great too. I just don't have it here because it's perishable. Spirulina is another algae. This is the powdered form of it here. Chlorella is another one, which usually is in tablets or powder. I know my son just eats these. Like he's happy to chew them up and eat them, which is how I always like them too. And it's really easy to get a lot of these in, or put them into other things where they're not even going to realize they're there if they don't like the taste of them on their own. So smoothies, shakes, you name it, you can incorporate those in pretty easily. And what those are great for is high protein, really high in protein. A lot of them are over 50% protein. So you've got a great, easy to digest source of protein. They're great sources of chlorophyll, the essential fatty acids, as well as other vitamins and minerals. So they've got that going for them, that whole easy to digest, super nutritious aspect. Another category of Things that kind of are along the algae line, maybe not quite as powerful, but still great, are the sea vegetables like dulse. I've got some dulse here. Dulse is one example. Nori, sea lettuce, kelp, aramay. There's a whole list of ones you may not have heard of before, but they're not that hard to find. And they have a lot of great minerals. They're great for detoxifying the body, pulling heavy metals and things out of the body. And this is another one that on its own, kids will just love to eat if they try it when they're young. My son just picks up and eats it. If you can put it in the dehydrator and make it really crunchy, and that's like a kind of like a chip in a way. It's really fun to munch on it that way too. So easy things that you can get into their diet regularly. Another category is foods that are high in essential fatty acids and or make a mucilaginous gel when soaked in water. Something that fits into that category is chia seed. And flax, hemp are all along these lines. They're high in omega-3s, and they're also high in protein again, easy to digest protein. This is chia that I have here, and when you soak it, it makes a really interesting gel, and that's what happens to it here. You can see in that jar. It's got this gooey kind of gel texture to it, and that really coats the organs. It can soothe the digestive system. It's a great source of calcium. It's higher in calcium than cow's milk, so you can make this gel and blend it in or stir it into other liquids. You can make it into crackers, just like many people have seen or heard of flaxseed crackers now. You can certainly use the flax, but you can also use the chia seed in the same way. It's the great source of omega-3s. It's high in iron. It's got a really high antioxidant profile. So to me, it's really like flax to a whole nother level. It's superior food. It's a little more expensive, still not too expensive, but you only need a little bit, and a little goes a long way. We're going to make a few recipes with the chia seed. The hemp seed also fits into that category, and that can be easily blended into milks, made a part of cookies or bars or in salads. It's very versatile as well. Another superfood that's really, really affordable and great and fun because kids can do it themselves at home is sprouts. And again, they are little individual pieces, and kids love things they can pick up with their hands and eat. So sunflower sprouts are an easy sell for children. They love to just munch on them or pick them off the tray and bite them the way they are. Other sprouts, bean sprouts like this. I know my son is a really big fan of these lentil sprouts. Anything small and round and like their finger size, I found they really, really like, and you don't have to even do anything to it. It's not like you have to jazz it up so they'll eat it. They'll just gravitate towards these little munchy things like peas and lentil sprouts. That's a French lentil, that's why it's a little darker there. Sprouts are extremely easy to digest. They have all of the hormones that are beneficial to the body. They help balance your hormones. They affect your DNA and RNA in a very strengthening way. They're very inexpensive. You can buy the seeds for less than $1 a pound and grow them easily on your kitchen counter, anywhere really. Done in hotel rooms, easy to do when you're traveling. And the kids can help because they can rinse them. They can watch them grow on a daily basis. That happens really quickly with most of them, and it's a great way to make them a part of things, and they get more excited about it because they're doing it themselves, which is always fun. So sprouts, other things like wheatgrass juice too. If you can get your kids to drink the wheatgrass juice, even better, even if you have to mix it with a little something else. Garbanzo beans, green peas, you can sprout all of those, even the fluffier sprouts like alfalfa and clover. If you get them eating that, I have a great picture, and it's my son just putting a handful in his mouth and they're just like fluffing all over the place. So they will eat them. It's not a big challenge to get them to generally. And there's other tips for getting them in if they won't eat them plain too, which we'll get into. There's a few other superfoods that are great for kids too. There's some berries and fruits that are a little more concentrated in things than others, and goji berries is a popular one now that's easy to add in. They're a little red berry that grows all over the world actually in a lot of different climates, but they're really high in antioxidants, even protein. They have a really interesting amino acid profile, so they're considered like a superfruit. And another one is bee pollen, which is what bees collect. Is they're like after they've gone to a flower and they're returning to the hive, this stuff sticks on their feet in some way, and it's one of the most complete foods on the planet. Like it's up there with wheatgrass in terms of nutrition and protein, and just powerful in ways that the science doesn't even fully understand yet. And let me get some of that. Mostly in a granular form here. We've got, it's like a yellowish orange color. It can vary in color depending on where it's from and what kind of flowers the bees visited. But it is important to make sure it's sustainably obtained without harming the bees at all. And it can help if you can get it from the local source. It's great because if you have any issues with allergens, this can actually build up your immune system so that you wouldn't react to some of those things. And it's kind of starchy and sweet, so it's not that hard to get kids to eat it anyway, because it's already got that taste to it. But just the best way to take it is really just to eat like a teaspoon or a tablespoonful of it straight on its own. But you can certainly put it in recipes as well. So that's a really great complete food. That a little goes a long way. And another one that's popular now that we're just learning more about is maca powder. It's kind of a starchy root. It's actually, I think, part of the cruciferous family, but it grows very, very high, in high altitude in South America. So it's one of the rare plants that can actually withstand this high altitude and actually grow. And it's what's called an adaptogen, which means it's going to normalize levels of your body. If something's overstimulated, it will bring it down. If it's understimulated, it will bring it up. It increases your ability to deal with stress in any way, your body's ability to deal with stress. So it's really helpful that way. It's a whitish cream-colored powder. That's the form you find it in. And you can just put a half a teaspoon or something into a shake or into porridge or whatever to help boost your child's or your own daily intake there. And again, these are things, some of them are more expensive, some of them are less, but the more you can make them a part of your daily diet, the more you're kind of boosting your immunity. You're giving yourself a little extra something that's going to help just carry you through and combat all the stressors that we experience on a daily basis. So all good things to throw a little more in if you've got it around. So with children's food, breakfast can be really important. Of course, starting your day, it's every part of that is important. So some ideas for what you can give them for breakfast are things like juice, for example, fresh juices. It's great to get your kids started with green juice as early as possible. Sometimes if they won't take it on its own, like cucumber, celery, kale, sprouts, whatever, you can add a little apple in, and that seems to go a long way in terms of helping it be more palatable for them if they're used to sweeter juices. It's easy to make things really green that actually don't taste really green, so I think getting them used to eating green things or not turned off by seeing something green is really important. So juicing is a great way to start off the day for them. But it's, in terms of something a little heartier, if they aren't into the juice, we've got a few ideas here. One of them is called chia porridge, and this is one of my son's favorites. We're going to start with some almond milk. This is kind of the liquid. This ends up being like a breakfast cereal of sorts that's loaded with the chia seed. You could also use flax if you like to substitute that, or if you have a harder time finding the chia seed. But we are going to start with about 1.5 cups of almond milk. You can use any nut milk that you might have on hand. Nut milk is made by basically blending soaked nuts or seeds up with about 3 to 4 times as much water, depending on how creamy you want it, and straining it out through a sprout bag. It's very simple. So we happen to have some almond here. We're just going to combine all the ingredients in this recipe in a big bowl. So we're going to do some chia seed, about a few tablespoons whole, and a few tablespoons ground, because I feel like ground it'll absorb a little faster, so if you need it in a hurry, it makes the porridge a little more quickly. But I like to break some of them down in case they don't chew it a lot, then you've got some of it ground up. So they're getting it both ways and some of it whole to clean out the intestines. So I have a little spice grinder here. I'm just gonna grind it up a bit. So ground up some and put some in their hole. And that is going to absorb water and create a gelatinous kind of texture like you see in here. A little bit. Now, from this point, if you wanted to make this and not add any fruit or sugar, if you're avoiding fruit or sugar, you can just sweeten it with some stevia and vanilla and leave it as is and not add any fruit into it. I like to put in, again, for the superfood value, we'll put some goji berries. And also let's throw in a handful of raisins. And I like to put a sliced banana in it as well. This is a big one, I might not need all of it. And what you'll have, this needs to sit for a little while, but what will happen is this will gel up and kind of have a, the consistency of a thick morning breakfast cereal, like oatmeal and it was cooked or something like that. And it's really quick and easy to make, and you can keep it in the, it'll keep for at least 4 days in the fridge, up to a week or so. And you can just serve it out in the morning, and it's that simple. So you've got a really great superfood sustaining start to the morning, something that's going to carry them through, give them a lot of energy, feed their brains the essential fatty acids in the morning. So it's really, really amazing breakfast all around. Another easy breakfast creation is, of course, a smoothie, and that's a great way to get all these other superfoods in. And you can make these really sustaining beverages that are a little easier to digest because it's all liquid, and it's going to carry them through the morning really well. So this is a simple one, again, making use of some of the superfoods here that we were talking about. This is the chia gel. So we're going to use some of this. If you want to make this at home, it's just 1/3 of a cup of seed to 2 cups of water, and you can just store it in your refrigerator. It'll keep for at least a week, and you can just scoop it out as you need it. So we're going to put about, I think it's 1/2 cup of chia gel. Add a tiny bit of sweetness. You're going to throw 1 soaked date in there. To make it nice and frosty and fun, we're going to put a frozen banana. If you don't have frozen bananas, you can throw a fresh one in. Freezing bananas is, I think it's a great thing to have on hand, especially with children. You just peel them when they're really ripe and put them in a plastic bag of some sorts or a container to store them in the freezer, and just keep a lot on hand. I know where I live, sometimes they'll have them on discount when they're super ripe, when nobody else wants to buy them, but that's like the time to snatch them up when they're really cheap and put a whole bunch in your freezer and have them ready to go for making banana ice cream through a juicer or using them in something like this. So I'm gonna get mine out of the freezer. Helps to break it up in a few pieces or chop it up if it's hard to break. They're actually really good to snack on just that way too, for children like to eat the frozen ones straight out of the freezer. Okay, we're gonna use a little bit of that maca powder I mentioned earlier. And if you'd like to know more about superfoods, there's a lovely handy chart, which I also wrote on, which goes into more detail about all of these superfoods mentioned and why they're beneficial and how you can use them. It's called the permachart there on superfoods. We're going to put about a teaspoon of maca powder. It's kind of got a sweet corn starchy kind of taste. To me, it has got like a flavor of corn, so it's pretty mild. It goes really well with desserts or anything sweet. And finally, we've got about a cup of nut or seed milk, whatever you have on hand or feel like making. I'll use up the rest of my almond, and I have some hemp milk over here too, so we'll use that to fill up the cup. And you could easily put greens in here at this point if you wanted to. You could put your green superfood powders. You could put your algae in there, any other fruit that you wanted to incorporate. We're just going to keep it basic here. Sometimes you'll hear some of the banana chunks still floating around in there. I think I might have a little nub or so, but that's okay. And the gel of the chia actually does get pretty smoothly blended up. You might see the flecks in there, but it blends right up nicely and kind of adds a nice texture to the smoothie and giving a little bit of a body. So of course, smoothies are that quick and easy, and there's endless varieties. So that's our superfood smoothie. So how do we get our kids to eat more veggies? If you're going from transitioning, that's when it can be a little trickier, but one of the things that really helps is a good dressing or sauce. If you've got a dressing or sauce that they really love, and I think it's the same with adults if they're trying to eat more veggies, more sprouts that they may not be used to the flavors of, the dressing makes all the difference. So finding a few recipes your kids love can be critical, and there's so many dressing recipes in books now. So it's not that hard. Usually if you know kind of what they liked before, you can look for the similar flavors and things. The first salad we're going to make here is a really quick, easy toss of a lot of little things. Like I said, the little bite-sized, finger-sized things for children. This one can be whipped up in a few minutes. So what we're going to use is some corn, which I was lucky enough to get fresh off the cob because it is in season now. But if you can't get fresh corn, it's okay to use frozen corn. It has been blanched quickly, so it's not entirely a raw product, but if you're okay having that balance in there, go ahead and use the frozen and just thaw it out. If you don't want to, you can certainly substitute it with another vegetable chopped up small. We've got some nice fresh corn. I've got, we're going to put some sunflower seeds in there, soaked and dehydrated. Another great protein source that's not too rich and heavy in fat like some of the other nuts. So these have been soaked ahead of time and then dehydrated so that they're nice and crunchy again. So they're enzyme active, but they're not wet anymore, so they get crunchy again and they're not as perishable. We'll put some of those in there. We're going to use dulse flakes. Like I mentioned, getting the sea vegetables in is important. If you just has the whole leaf dulse, you can snip it up into pieces. The flakes distribute nicely in a salad, so sometimes we use those instead. And they're great to shake on any salad or any other food your child might be eating. We're going to use a cup of sprouted lentils. These are the French lentils again, that's why they have a darker look. And some peas. Again, in season, you can get them fresh, that's great. If you want to use frozen ones, that's okay too. Or you can sprout whole green peas, the same kind of, that would be the same seed you would use to grow pea greens or pea shoots. And you can use the sprouted ones in here instead of those if you'd like. So you've got a nice little mixture here. And this can be eaten just as it is with no dressing on it at all, and it's going to be really flavorful once you start chewing and releasing like the flavor of the peas and the corn and the dulse. Really, really nice. But you can also go ahead and toss a little bit of any dressing you might have on hand in there, and that's what I'll do here. Here's a little bit of pre-made dressing. We'll just put a few tablespoons in there just to lightly coat the veggies. And you've got a really quick, easy salad there. Certainly you can add more sprouts to it. You can wrap it up serve it in a lettuce leaf of some kind, so it's like a wrap. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. I personally like to add onions to it, and my son doesn't like raw onions, but I do, so if I'm eating it, I'll dice some onions to put in, or scallions. And there you go, very quick and simple. Another child's favorite I found is noodles. Kids love noodles, so we can do our raw noodles too. We've got a really wonderful thing called kelp noodles, which are newer kind of to the market, just mostly made just out of kelp seaweed, and they actually are a raw product. So these are really fun to put a sauce on and serve to your children. Or you can make noodles using a spiral slicer, such as this one. And I'll just demonstrate that quickly so you can see what that's like. This is the Ben Reiner turning vegetable slicer, and it has little comb blades here so that when you're pushing the vegetable up against it, it's going to be basically shredding it into long strands. So we'll do a quick zucchini on that. Show what it's like. You can do this kind of noodle with any starchy root vegetable, zucchini. You can do ribbons with cucumbers, butternut squash, all the kind of winter hard squashes, sweet potato. So it's a pretty fun tool to have. I find I like this one better because of the horizontal pushing rather than the vertical. And you can do continuous quantity. You don't have to stop and empty it out at all, which is nice. Basically prop it on the edge, push and turn. And you'll quickly have a decent portion of noodles. Long spaghetti-like or fettuccine-like noodles. So you could use them in this recipe that we're going to do next too, which is a Thai noodle dish. We're going to use the kelp noodles because that's what we're going to do this time. But like I said, usually if you can't get these or you think these are too expensive, go right ahead and use the vegetable ones as well. It's still going to be really excellent with those. So I'm just going to rinse these first because that's what they recommend on the package here, rinsing them off. Okay, so we have our rinsed kelp noodles. One thing you want to do is go ahead and cut them up before you put them in your bowl. They are pretty long, so it's a good idea to just chop them a few times. Make them not quite as long. And you can add those to your mixing bowl. Now we're going to add a few veggies. I'm going to do some small broccoli florets. So I like little ones there so they tenderize quickly. And save your stems, use them for juice, use them for a slaw. Easy to interchange the vegetables here. You can put whatever you've got on hand and along with this dish. Okay, so we've got our broccoli florets in there, and we're going to do some carrot as well. It's fun to do thin julienne strips for that. If you don't want to spend the time cutting it that way, you can certainly do slices or whatever you're comfortable with. It's also handy if you have a slicer like this. This one does little shreds, so they're not going to be as big as what I did there, but use that. You're going to get little tiny flecks. It can be faster if you're not comfortable with the knife or just want a smaller piece in there. You could do it that way as well. Okay, you can add red bell peppers to that. That would be really nice. Other fresh herbs, fresh basil, if you like that or your kids like that. Would be really nice in this one. So we've got a toss here of the noodles and the veggies. Now we just need to make a creamy sauce to go on top. And to do that, we're going to use some almond butter. We're going to do a little chopped ginger and garlic. Ginger and garlic are also really powerful foods in terms of health properties, digestion, and the garlic is really antibacterial, anti-parasitic, antiviral, so it really makes the bad stuff want to go out. So anytime you can add more of those in, it's really therapeutic as well. Let's see, about a half a cup of water we need. And if this is a little too creamy for you, you can always add more water. We're going to put some scallions in there. Just chop them really roughly. Blender will do the rest for you. Okay, we're going to use a little lime juice for our tangy effect. A little bit of the Bragg's liquid aminos for our salty flavor enhancer. And then a little stevia, because if you've ever had a Thai noodle sauce, they're often a blend of this like limey, sweet, kind of creamy flavors. So I find that a few drops kind of helps it come closer to what I'm looking for. Okay, now we're ready to blend. Now we have a nice creamy sauce, which we want to make sure we taste now so that we like it and we don't feel like we want to adjust it at all before we put it on our noodle dish. So you can even ask your children to taste it, see if they like it before you put it on. Make sure they know that you're working hard making this food for them and you want them to like it. I might put a little more stevia in there. Just add a little more sweetness. And a touch more Bragg's. It's really important to get in the habit of tasting your food before you call it done because ingredients vary in taste so much. You could have really strong scallions where one might be extremely intense and the next time they could be really mild. Or broccoli from California at a certain time of year is going to be completely different tasting than broccoli from your local area and season. So it's important to keep in mind that tasting is really, really essential to always coming out with something that you like because it's never going to be exactly the same as when the person created it. So if you kind of take power over making this something you like, you're always going to end up with something that you really enjoy a lot. So we're going to blend again and taste again. That's better. It's also good to keep in mind that if you're putting it on vegetables of any kind, it generally will get slightly diluted after it marinates for a while because water will leach from the vegetables. So sometimes it's good to have it a little stronger than you think you might want it because after it sits for a while, it's going to mellow, be somewhat diluted. So keep that in mind if you're using it for a marination of some sort. I also like to throw, I don't know if it's mentioned in the recipe or not, but bean sprouts in here too, the white long mung bean sprouts. Yet again, getting the sprouts in, the more the better. It's a good idea to add those if you're not going to eat this right away, though. Add them right at the end because they will get mushier from the dressing than the other vegetables will get. Okay, and we mix it all up. And the broccoli will definitely tenderize with time. Some people will even really thinly slice it instead of leaving in the florets because it'll just soften and marinate even faster that way. That's completely up to you. So I've got this really delicious Thai noodle type salad now. Ready to eat or ready to marinate, however you want to do it, and this will definitely keep for at least 4 or 5 days in the fridge. So you will notice that if your almond butter wasn't, if you ever put almond butter in the fridge, it gets a lot more firm, and if you put this salad in there, it's going to get more firm because the almond butter is going to solidify. So it'll look like it's kind of all stuck together when you first take it out of the fridge, but as it gets warmer, it'll go back to looking like this does now. Another way to increase your children's vegetable content and your own, or what you're ingesting as far as vegetables go, is to make wraps and rolls. And kids really love these handheld things, again, that they can pick up and eat the way they are. So doing a simple wrap can make a huge difference, and you can often put a lot of more things in there that you think that maybe they wouldn't eat, but once they're all wrapped in there and flavored maybe with a little sauce, they find them really, really fun and enjoyable, and they can help roll them too, which is really fun. One recipe we're going to make is for a taco, a mock taco, but you can easily take a cabbage leaf. We're going to do it with our romaine just to kind of hold it almost like a boat. A collard green, nori rolls, put any kind of filling in there and roll it up for them. And it's a really fun treat, and it's an easy way if you're taking things with you to roll them up and have them to go. So any kind of filling you can think of, really, you can use in a roll. This one is going to try and mimic a taco kind of style meal. So we're going to use the romaine leaves, and we're going to make a little bit of a crumbly walnut meat filling in our food processor here. So I've got some walnuts here that are soaked and dehydrated, so they're crunchy. So this will make them crumble up to the texture that I'm looking for, better than just a plain soaked one would. But you could still make this with that. Just how picky you are about the texture really is all that's going to be affected. So I've got my dried walnuts. I'm going to put a little chili powder for seasoning. This is not a spicy chili powder. This is more of a flavor blend kind of chili powder. I have a little cayenne too. If you know your kids are not going to like that at all, just leave it out. But if you want a little bit of a kick, go ahead and put it in. A little bit of garlic again, getting these powerful foods in any way we can. And feel free to increase the garlic if you like it garlicky, not a problem. So we've got about half a clove of garlic in this particular size batch. Then we're going to put a little of the Bergonzi just to give it a little bit of a salty flavor, mild. Okay, now we're going to just process it, pulse it. Pulse is basically a button that's only going to be, the food processor will only run when you're holding it down. So it's great for chopping things because that stopping and starting really moves things around in the food processor so that just the bottom isn't getting chopped up. So it's really good for chopping nuts and seeds evenly. So that's what we're going to do here. So what we've got here now is a nice little crumbly filling for our tacos. Looks like it might need a little bit of chili powder, a little bit more. It's not as dark as normal. There we go. And pulse it real quickly to incorporate that all through. And so now what you would do with this is you take your shell, so to speak, and scoop a little bit of this in the bottom. And then the toppings are really up to you, but I like to do a shredded veggie again. Just kind of can look like shredded cheese if that's something you're trying to get away from. You can do a whiter shredded vegetable or shredded squash that will be that same color. You could do some scallion on there. Happen to have here a little bit of a hot sauce, which is just like a pepper blend with a little bit of seasoning to it. This is pretty spicy, so maybe the adults would just like this one, but it's nice to have a little something wet on here, sauce. If you really want to be decadent, you could put a little guacamole on there if you wanted. Some sprouts in there. These are some really nice fresh sunflower sprouts. And a little bit of the sauce. This is a pretty hot one, so I'm not going to put too much. And you can kind of push the sprouts down a little. You can just pick it up and eat it just like that. It's really delicious, fresh. You don't have so much starchy heaviness like if you're eating it out of a corn shell of some sort. You're getting a lot of sprouts in there, but you're also getting a little bit of the nuts too, so it's something a little more dense to fill you up. So it's a really great, easy way. The kids especially will like some of those smaller, crunchier romaine leaves that are like on the inner of the romaine heart too. But you can roll this into the wrap like a collard green or something else as well. So that's a quick and easy taco. So dips are another great way to get kids to eat more veggies. We can dip things in dips much more so than I think we're used to. You know, carrots and celery sticks obviously work really well, but any kind of veggie cut into a half moon, something like that, you know, that they can pick up and dip, cucumber slices. You can make sticks out of jicama and celery root and rutabaga, you name it, to dip in a dip. Of course, crackers can work as well, but I find I'm always trying to get more. It's easy to get the crackers in, but sometimes the veggies are what you want to try and get more of. So any kind of good dip is really going to help them get a lot more veggies in. So we're going to use our strong blender here, the Vitamix, and we're just going to make a really simple dip that has zucchini as a base, which is really makes a nice creamy base for a dip. So we are going to start with about 2 cups of chopped zucchini. There's about 1. Okay, so we've got roughly 2 cups of zucchini going into our blender. We're going to put something else in there to give it a little creaminess. I'm going to use almond butter now, but you could use tahini if you wanted to, raw sesame tahini, or other nut butter, or again the soaked nuts. If you just have like pine nuts or almonds or something like that, you would put those directly in roughly the same quantity. You might need a tiny bit more than you would butter because the butter's concentrated and the nuts fill up the space. A lot of people make really yummy hummus versions of dips like this with no beans or even nuts. You can do a zucchini hummus without any nuts at all in it if you want to cut down on the nuts or just don't have them available. That works too because it makes such a nice creamy base, like it's comparable to the pureed chickpea kind of texture. So we're going to put zucchini, almond butter, a little bit of garlic again. A little bit of ground cumin. About a tablespoon of lemon juice. And whatever your flavor enhancer of choice is, kelp powder, Bragg's, Dulse, we'll squirt. And now we're ready to blend. Okay, so we're gonna taste it, make sure we like it. I think it's nice. The zucchini is really kind of a light, fluffy texture, and you'll notice I didn't have to add any other liquid to that recipe. It's plenty liquidy without any additional water. Once it gets blended, it's quite creamy. So you've got a really great dip. Found that this also is really good dehydrated. So if you had made some of this and ate it as a dip, you could take the rest of it, spread it on a dehydrator tray. Kind of like, let's see, you would take your tray like this, just pour the batter on, and use a spatula or whatever you've got available to really just smooth it out like that and let it dry out, and it's actually gonna make a nice cracker, a yummy cracker too. Just got with the zucchini and the almond butter, that's enough to make a nice batter base. So you can use it that way as well. Those one of many dips you can make for kids. So now we're gonna get into using our dehydrator and how useful of a tool that is, particularly when working towards getting children to eat this way. This is how we can make crackers, cookies, all these crunchy things, pie crusts, quiches, burgers, patties, all that kind of stuff. So it's really, really, really important, I feel, when you're trying to make food for children, especially if you're converting children over that may not be eating, have been raised this way from the beginning. So there's a lot of different crackers we can make. First, we're going to start with the flax cracker, which is a very popular, widely known one, very simple, very economical. Flaxseed is inexpensive. And it's really doesn't require much. You can make this without any tools at all other than the dehydrator. We're gonna puree a little bit of flavoring in our food processor, but easy to do one without the extra vegetable flavoring that we're gonna add here. So first we're gonna start by combining our flax, some whole and some ground. I like to do roughly half and half, just because the whole, I feel like if you do a cracker with all whole seeds, obviously you need to make sure you chew it really well to get the benefits of it, but it's a little tougher of a cracker. I find that if you use some ground, you can spread it a little more thinly and make a more delicate cracker. So that's just more of a personal preference than anything, but you can decide, try both ways and decide what you like the best. I'm going to do about 3/4 of a cup whole seed and about a cup of ground, which I will do over here in my spice grinder. That's about half a cup. And this is golden flax. This just happens to be what I have got today, but you can use the brown flax too, or a mixture of both if you want it to be speckled with different colors. I know my son loves using the spice grinder, so it's a fun thing they can push down on the top and do too if you want to get them involved. Also the food processor, actually, he's really good about putting things in and he knows which button to push. So that's another task you can certainly have them help you with. And now we're going to make a puree of basically flavoring for the cracker, and then we'll add a little bit water, stir it all together to make the batter, and that'll start to gelatinize and make a batter that's really easy to spread. So into the food processor, this is kind of some Mexican flavors, this cracker. We're going to put some cilantro, about roughly a half of a bell pepper. A bit of onion. Okay, a little bit of garlic. And a few spices here, some cumin, some chili powder, and a little lemon and brags for some flavoring. Now we're going to puree all of this up. Scrape down the sides here. Smells really good in there. Okay, so we've got our puree. And you can do bigger pieces in your crackers, but what happens then when you go to dehydrate them is if you had a big chunk of vegetable, once it shrinks, there's kind of a hole in the cracker because it will lose water. So it's good to have them somewhat small, whatever you do. And you could do it by hand if you wanted to, but you would just want to chop them up pretty small so you wouldn't have the big holes in your cracker, and you could spread it nice and thin. Okay, time to add water to our bowl. And start with about 1.5 cups. We're going to also add our puree and just stir it all together. So as this sits, it's going to absorb more and more of the water and get more gelatinized and not quite as watery looking as it does at this moment. And you want to let it rest for a little while to get to that point before you spread it out on a tray. You can also taste your cracker batters at this point too. Obviously it's not what it's going to taste like when it's done, but keep in mind that dehydration concentrates the flavor, so you wouldn't want it to be too salty, for example, now, or when it's dehydrated, it's going to be even saltier. So now we would be, even though it's not quite gelatinized yet, I'm going to show you what you would do here. With crackers, you always want to use one of these sheets on the trays. Those are the Paraflex sheets. You could also use unbleached parchment paper underneath if you don't have these yet. I find that sometimes, depending on the cracker, it's still kind of stick to the paper and can be a little bit cumbersome to remove it, so that's up to you. These wipe off nice and easily and quickly. But you want to do that so that it doesn't obviously stick or sink through to the plastic tray there. And we're going to spread the batter out. I don't have my favorite spreading tool here, so I forgot it, but I love an offset spatula, and that's what looks like a pie server. It's kind of angled down with a handle so that I can kind of spackle it all around there quickly. It's also helpful to spread your cracker batter on the sheet on a flat surface. If you try and do it on here, you go over the edges, when it dries, it really sticks to this edge thing, and it's hard to get it even. Here, what you can do is you can spread it on. You can go over the edges if you want. You know, I always clean my counter first. And a little bit more. What you can do is, it'll be a little thicker ideally when you're spreading it out. You can actually use a knife and kind of trim the edges away from it so you've got a full, perfectly square sheet. And you'll just have nice uniform crackers if you do it that way, and then you can kind of cut the crackers ahead of time. And you can do flax batter pretty thin. It does have a little water there, and the vegetable water from the vegetables. So you can see how I went totally over the edge there. And then generally you can kind of take your knife and just separate away from the edge, the extra. It would be a little more smooth and even than this is right now because I'm not letting it sit as long as I normally would, but you can generally then pick it up right off the counter and slide it on, kind of slide your tray under because it's so wet it's running a little bit. Then you've just got a nice full even tray, and then when it is a little thicker, you'll be able to kind of draw lines in it even with the flax batter so that when it's dry it'll be broken into those shapes already, so you can make triangles or whatever shapes. If you're doing a thicker batter, a non-flax cracker batter, you can even get your kids and use cookie cutter shapes and make fun shapes that way. So then you're just going to slide it in your dehydrator. You spread all your batter out, and then I'll just come over usually and scoop it right off. You start over again. The next tray. And what happens is when you use those sheets underneath, the bottom is not going to dry as fast as the top because the air isn't contacting it. So generally you'll need to flip things midway. Where that midway point is, it really isn't critical. The great thing about using a dehydrator is that it's not an exacting science. We're doing things at such a low temperature that you could leave it in for 2 days and it's still just going to be dry if it's dry already. So you can just look at it, take a look. If it feels like the top is kind of, you can touch it and it doesn't get on you at all, often then you can flip it. With flax, it often starts to bevel off the sheet and curl up a little bit, so that's obvious. It's obvious then that you could flip it over. A great way to flip is to take your tray when it's at that point, put another tray upside down on top of it and hold them together. Flip the whole thing, and then this is going to be the top. You'll peel the sheet off, and that just makes it nice and easy. So you just dehydrate it until they're dry, and the way you know that is just tasting it. Some items people like to not dry fully, like a burger, for example. You just want it to be warm and maybe crusty on the outside, but moist in the beginning. So getting to know your dehydrator, it's really all about personal preference, what you're making. If somebody says, oh, it takes 5 hours, that really isn't going to be true all the time. So I never like to give times, because if you filled it up with a lot of wet stuff in there and it's really humid where you live, it's going to take a lot longer than if you had one tray. You know, the temperature is drier. There's a lot of factors that affect dehydration time. So it's really just about, getting to know when something's done. When it's dry, and then you take it out and store it in some sort of airtight container usually. So that's one cracker. Next, we're going to make more of a bread-like cracker, something that can be a little more pliable, shapeable, cuttable, still not thick like a loaf of bread, but works really well to make like mock sandwiches or pizza crust, anything of that nature. So this one is a nice oniony one, which I really like. I love onions, so my son loves this one too. And we started off by marinating onions here in some of the Bragg's liquid aminos for, it was about an hour, I think now, and that's just going to soften them up a little so they're not so firm in the cracker when I'm trying to spread the batter out. it just helps the process of making the cracker along. So those are just tossed there. And now I'm going to grind up and add the other ingredients to it. So I find grinding the sunflower seeds dry in a food processor works really well. You could do it in a dry blender as well, but I'm just gonna do it this way here. 3/4 cup roughly. And I've got a little bit of chia and flax here. You could use either or. Both of them have the same kind of gelatinous properties that work really well for a cracker. I had a little stash of flax over here. It wasn't quite enough to make the rest of this recipe, so I'm putting chia in too. And I'm just going to grind it in my spice grinder here quickly first. Okay, and the only reason I'm putting it in here is just it's going to mix together with the sunflower seeds really evenly, so it just kind of helps me in my mixing process. You could just dump the ground seed right into the bowl and grind the flax separately. Either way, it doesn't really matter. So they're pretty well ground up in here. I'm going to mix them in here with my onions. And you can toss this a little, but we're still going to add a little water because those seeds are going to suck up that water. Roughly a cup. And again, this is not going to gelatinize immediately here. It takes a little bit of time to get to a good batter consistency, maybe 15 minutes or so. You could certainly let it go for longer if you just had time to make the batter but not spread the cracker out yet. So either way. So this would gelatinize somewhat more. And all you're going to do is just like we did before, you're going to spread it out. You can make this one thicker if you want it to be more bread-like and pliable, or thinner if you want it to be more like a cracker. It's going to come out looking something like this. As you can see, it's a little bendy. I was able to easily cut it into a square. This just happens to be an edge, and that's why it's curved a little bit. This particular batch, I did half scallions, I think, and half onions, so it's got some green flecks in it. But it's really nice, tasty. Thicker would be great for pizza crust, or like if you want to use it like sandwich bread, put some sprouts and a spread in there and put another one on top. Works really well for that. And then the other ones here are the Mexi flax crackers. This is what they come out like. This particular batch was made with the darker brown flax seeds, not the yellow golden ones, so that's why it looks darker in color. But you can see how those are kind of thinner. So that's it. Quick, easy batter on the onion bread there. And right now I definitely wouldn't want to spread it yet because it's not quite gelatinized yet. It would just be kind of chunky on there. But after about 10 or 15 minutes, it would be ideal for spreading out. And you don't have to cut this one ahead of time. This one will still be pliable enough to cut after it's somewhat dehydrated or totally dehydrated, so it's really up to you which way you want to do it. You could put it into circles or rounds for pizza crust, however, depending on what you have in mind. So again, very versatile, great with other herbs added in, quick and easy. So yet another crunchy munchy snack. It's a great way to eat more greens, which we all are trying to do more of, especially with your children, is to make these really delicious crunchy green chips. Most people call them kale chips because they end up making them out of kale, but I've done them out of chard, collards, pretty much any dark leafy green, and they're all a little different in texture, but it still comes out really well. So you can use whatever you've got or whatever you like the best. Basically, all we're doing here is we're chopping up our green leaves slightly, and we're putting some kind of dressing that dehydrates and makes them really flavorful on them in the dehydrator. So it's really, again, quite simple. We're just using our blender and then we're mixing that up with our kale. So first I'm going to chop our kale into a bowl here. Not going to do the full recipe that you have provided just because for demonstration I don't have a big enough bowl. This is a really good recipe you need a big mixing bowl so you don't make a mess everywhere on the counter, because the kale takes up a lot of space before it's marinated down. So this is a dinosaur or lacinato kale, black kale, there's a lot of different names for it. This one works, I like this one for the chips. Some people really like the curlier green and red kale because of the way it holds the dressing, because it's got more ridges on it. I like them all. I'm not that picky about how they come out, but I think they all have been really delicious, and my family's definitely eaten them all different ways. So you want to leave relatively big pieces in there because it's just going to be easier to remove them from the dehydrator tray when they're dry, and also so they don't crumble into little tiny bits once they're being stored afterwards. So decent sized chunks there. When you get to where there's a really thick stem, it's a good idea to take it out because this is going to take a lot longer to dehydrate than the thin leafy part. So you might find that the chips seem done, but then you bite into a stem and it's kind of chewy and hard still. So in order to keep it consistent, it's a good idea to take the stem out where it starts to get too big and save those stems for green juice of some sort. So I'm going to read the rest of what I started cutting. And you can put any dressing on these to me, the best thing to do is to not put an oil-based dressing in the dehydrator. So any dressing that doesn't have oil in it will be really quite good, or avocado. Two things that you don't really want to put in the dehydrator. Oil only because it's just being exposed to constant open air, which is what oxidizes and makes it go rancid. So I avoid putting oil in. Like if we put a marinated salad in, I would wash the dressing off if I'm just trying to dehydrate leftovers so they don't go bad. And avocado obviously doesn't dry out, it just oxidizes as well. But any creamy kind of dressing works really well with a nut butter or tahini of some sort. And we're using the tahini. This is a great calcium recipe with the greens. It's got parsley in it with the tahini, so it's really nutritious all around. And kids really like eating the greens this way, so it's really spectacular that way. So I've got all my greens in a bowl. Now we're going to whip up a quick dressing. And this dressing also has like a lot of seaweed in it too, so we're getting more minerals. It's always all about minerals, which is what's harder to get from a lot of our produce today. So I've got some parsley. You can save your stems for juice or blend them up. This blender will blend up stems no problem. We're going to use some of the raw sesame tahini, roughly a half a cup. You can always just toss them with a little something salty or whatever and not even use your blender to make up a dressing. I know sometimes people just put them in this way. After having them this way though, they're just so good. I would find it hard to go back to just keeping them plain. I like this so much. About 1/3 of a cup of lemon juice. Let's see here. A little bit of kelp powder, again, good minerals, good calcium, and also helps a good source of sodium. A little dulse or nori, whatever sea veggies you have around. I have a big bag of sea lettuce at home that I've just been plugging away slowly at, and I usually end up throwing that into my kale chip dressing with a sheet of nori. I put some dulse, half a cup of water. Keep running out of my water. And whatever, if you want a little extra salt in there you go. If you want a spicy chip, sprinkle of cayenne. I'm gonna blend it well, so make sure you get all your parsley and your sea veggies thoroughly throughout. And once you've got this, it'll look kind of creamy-ish, thick enough so that it will really coat and stick on the kale. You're just gonna pour it all on. I didn't do the full amount of kale, so I don't think I'm gonna pour all of it on there right now. You just wanna rub it, kind of rub it a little bit, make sure it coats all the leaves. Make a mess. It's kind of hard to avoid that. And then once you've got all your leaves really nice and coated, you feel like they're well coated enough, you just start spreading them out on a tray. You don't have to be too picky about, them overlapping or anything like that. They can touch each other and be on top of each other. As you can see, a dehydrator this small, you wouldn't be able to fit a whole lot in. That's why I prefer at least the 5 tray. I think the 9 tray is best, because when I make stuff like this, I don't like to make tiny amounts because it does keep for so long. Why not fill it up, make use of the fact that I'm using the electricity for the dehydrator, and make a whole bunch at once, because they do keep for a long time. I mean, I haven't had kale chips go bad on me yet. We've had them for weeks. Because the farm I go to, my CSA, they were about to have to mow down their kale, so we could go pick as much as we wanted. So we just went and I made big batch of kale chips in the big bus tubs like they have here. It's like, oh, got to make use of all this good stuff. We couldn't let it mow it down, so make lots because they store really well. So you're going to do something like that on a tray and then slide it right in, fill up the next tray. Also with these dehydrators, how close the trays are together, you often have to skip a space in between because the things are thicker than that. So here you may be limited to like 2 trays in there at a time. You spread them out. Depending on how thickly you layer them, you may need to flip some of them over. Like if you left them in all day, at the end of the day, you might want to check and see if it was really wet or saucy on the bottom of your layers. You might need to flip them to fully dry them. Otherwise, I'll just usually leave them in overnight and then check in the morning if I needed to flip anything. Make sure they're really dry and crispy. And what you'll end up with, pardon my gooey fingers, are some really nice green chips like that. And you just want to store them in something airtight because they do absorb moisture from the air, just like any other cracker will. It won't be quite as crispy if it's sitting exposed to air for an amount of time. So if they do get a little moist, you can always put them back in to crisp them up again. But it takes about a day, and then you've got all these lovely chips. It's really easy to eat a lot of greens and fiber from your greens that way. So it's delicious, and I'm so glad I finally started trying these and making these because they've been a big hit with everybody I know. All right, so we're quickly going to revisit our chia porridge here just so I can show you how it's begun to gelatinize here, and it's got that nice kind of thick soupy texture like a breakfast cereal might have, or anything that you might have had before in a cooked way. It's still going to gel further than this because it hasn't been too tremendously long, but it kind of looks like tapioca pudding if you've ever had that before, the way the seeds kind of gel up and have like a protective gel around them and then thicken the liquid. So you can see how that would be a really yummy bowl to have in the morning there. A great way to start your day and give you some nourishing energy after you've had juice, or with your kids if they don't drink the juice. Our final recipe is going to be a basic energy bar for kids. This is really great. They might see all their friends eating bars or such and such things of that nature, and this way we can make our own. They keep for a long time, and it's really simple. Again, we're just going to do it on the food processor, press it on a dehydrator tray, and what you'll end up with is something along these lines. Nice little packaged bars. If you buy these in the store, they're going to run you usually at least $3 a bar for something similar to this. So obviously it's really economical to do it yourself, and I don't think it takes too much time. So what we're going to do is start combining all our ingredients in the food processor. I've got some bananas. I like using bananas in them because they keep the bars nice and soft too, so they don't get too hard and crunchy. We'll just break up some of our bananas to the food processor. Another great way to sneak some more superfoods in if you want, you can add the maca powder to this. We're going to add a little goji. We're going to put some blue-green algae flakes in here too. We squeak them in wherever we can. Got about 2 cups of soaked nuts. These are almonds here. About a half a cup of raisins. I'm going to put some of the blue-green algae flakes that I have here into this recipe. Boost our protein, give a little more chlorophyll in there. We're going to put some dates. Just have to take the pits out of these quickly. And then we're going to also add a little bit of the soaking liquid from the dates to help get this processed and moving around in our food processor. Alrighty, pour some of that in there. And a little chia seed to help gel it again and to add a little bit more of the super nutrition to our bars. Got it freshly ground up, chia seed. You could use flax if you don't have the chia. It's going to help thicken it as well as adding the nutritive value to it. And we'll stir in a little goji berries after we processed it. So we've got some little flecks of color in there, like you'll notice if you take a look at those. So I might have to work this a little. I'll start pulsing. I might have to stop and move it around a little. That's just the nature of this mixture because it's kind of sticky and more hearty. I'm going to dump some of my goji berries in there and grab a spoon to kind of stir them in. So you can mix this all right in the food processor. You don't even have to dirty another bowl. And now you've got a thick, gooey mixture that you're just going to spread again on one of the sheets. This one you do a little thicker so that it comes out nice and chewy and hearty and not too dry and brittle. Say you might start with like a 3/4 of an inch or so, but it's really up to you and how you want the bar to be in the end. So spread that out. That's definitely going to need a flipping halfway through or roughly halfway through. As soon as you see that the top is kind of firmed up and it won't stick if you were to flip it over and put it on this, you can do that tray on top of the other trick that I mentioned earlier where you just flip it, put it upside down onto what's now the top, hold them together, flip it, and then peel off the sheet from the bottom. That's an easy way to flip. So these are our completed bars, and you would want to store these ideally in refrigeration because they will spoil with time because they're not completely dry and hard. There's a little moisture in there. There's some softness from the banana and the dates, and that can mean spoilage. Any moisture in an item means potential for spoilage. So anything that you don't fully dry to something hard and brittle, it's a good idea to keep it in refrigeration rather than just in an airtight container in a cupboard. Other than that, anything dry, the kale chips, the crackers, either of the crackers, the bread, you can store that in your cupboards at room temperature. As long as it's in something airtight, it'll stay nice and crisp the way it was when you took it out of the dehydrator. So that's our bar. You can see how that could easily be made into a cookie or flavored in a number of ways, stirred in chopped fruit using fruit and season. It's very adaptable and quick and easy to do. Just do it in your food processor and you're all set. Well, thank you for joining me for this food prep video today. I hope that you've taken a lot of tidbits for your children and yourself away with you. You can always contact me. My email address is on the video here. And eat well and be well. Thank you very much.